Topping today's news, Governor Scott Walker is pulling out of the presidential sweepstakes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Live at 5. We're following two big stories today. Some sad news from the state capitol. Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Patrick Crooks died today. We'll get to that story in just a moment. But first, 10 weeks ago, Governor Scott Walker launched his campaign for the Republican presidential nomination.
But it appears that run is coming to an end in moments. News 3's Eric Franke and Jessica Arp are joining us live from the Edgewater Hotel, where the governor is about to hold a news conference. Eric?
Susan and Mark, good evening. And yeah, as you mentioned, 70 days, 10 weeks to the day, we were in Waukesha when the governor launched his presidential campaign. He is expected to take the podium behind us in just a few minutes here at the Edgewater Hotel and announce that he is suspending his run for the White House. He was having trouble gaining traction in a crowded field of some 16 candidates or however many were left, many people losing track. And Jessica Arp, it looks like he is the latest, joining Rick Perry, who left last week to leave this race.
Well, he is, and we believe that there's a couple of things that are leading to this. One, as you alluded to, was the momentum that he was losing in this race. The latest CNN poll that was released over the weekend showed him with less than 1% support in this race. If the other polls that would continue to come out over the coming weeks would have kept going that way, he would not have made it to the main stage in the debate that was coming up in October. So that was very important. We're also hearing the New York Times reporting that fundraising was an issue as well. We were hearing that some of his fundraisers were looking at supporting other people. Of course, there was a fundraising deadline coming up as well, but there are a lot of momentum issues contributing to this race, but it is a remarkable moment that it was only 70 days that he was in this race.
Nobody would have expected that back in the second week of July when he joined the race. You talk about the debates, which seemed to drive so much of the polling numbers. This was a dramatic drop when you look at where his poll numbers were back in, say, March, months before he entered the race, to where they were as they came out after this last debate.
Well, yeah, and really, truly, this whole conversation about him running for president started, remember, back in January when he did this speech in Iowa, this Iowa Freedom Summit, and it was a breakout speech for him. And the momentum started then. The poll numbers started to rise over that period of time, but the governor saying he wanted to focus on the budget. He stayed out from officially announcing, started the 501c3, making some of these steps, but not actually officially announcing until July. But as we all know, Donald Trump announces his run for president in June, and some of that sucks the air out of the room, gets a lot of attention. So it was after, ironically, the governor started his official run for president that we saw those numbers start to drop from where they were. Some people saying he should have seized on the momentum much earlier in the year, but this is not what actually took place, and obviously bringing us to today.
Again, the governor expects to take the podium behind us in just a moment. When you look at the personalities, and at some point the GOP primary had to pare down some of these numbers, a personality like Donald Trump in the race, Governor Walker really couldn't get over that hump with that big personality, as you mentioned, taking a lot of air out of the conversations.
Yeah, and there was, some questions about his performances in these debates. The Scott Walker that we saw in this debate was very similar to the ones that we saw in 2014, the person we saw running for governor at that time. But that versus what you see, the personalities who are running for president, the charisma that you see on that stage all at one time is a much different thing.
All right, well, we are waiting for the governor. We're going to throw it back to Mark and Susan. Of course, we'll get right back down here as soon as the governor takes the podium.
All right, we'll get to you as soon as the governor comes out. Thank you, guys. The director of the Marquette Law School, Charles Franklin, is here with some perspective on all this. This surprised a lot of people today.
It certainly surprised me. This is one of the more dramatic collapses of a presidential campaign that I can think of. In the speed with which the poll numbers came down, since the beginning of September, his poll numbers have been 3, 5, 3, 2, 2, and 0. That's a spectacular decline from in the mid-teens as recently as June and early July. Also, the fact that it followed a period from, as Jessica was saying, from late January, early February through June, where he was consistently in the top 3 in national polls and consistently in first place in Iowa. Finally, this is a collapse that comes not from other campaigns attacking. There were no negative ads being run against Governor Walker during this period, but rather the campaign simply couldn't sustain itself.
All right, the governor is now taking the podium at the Edgewater Hotel. We will go there now live.
to the family of Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Patrick Crooks. We will let the Supreme Court make the official announcement like that, but we just want to pass on our prayers and our sympathy to him and his family, certainly his wife and his children, and all of his extended family. And we'll have more to comment on that in the days to come. As a kid, I was drawn to Ronald Reagan because he was a Republican and a conservative. But most of all, I admired him because of his eternal optimism in the American people. That thought came into my head when we were all standing on the stage at the Reagan Library last Wednesday. Ronald Reagan was good for America because he was an optimist. Sadly, the debate taking place in the Republican Party today is not focused on that optimistic view of America. Instead, it has drifted into personal attacks. In the end, I believe that the voters want to be for something and not against someone. Instead of talking about how bad things are, we want to hear how we can make them better for everyone. We need to get back to the basics of our party. We are a party that believes that people create jobs, not the government. And the best way to grow the economy is to get the government out of the way and build it from the ground up. We are a party that believes that the way to measure success in government is by how many people are no longer dependent on the government, because we ultimately believe in the dignity of work. We are the party that believes that a strong military leads to peace through strength, and that will protect our children and future generations, that good will ultimately triumph over evil. We are a party that believes in the American people, not the federal government. These ideas will help us win the election next fall, and more importantly, these ideas will make our country great again. To refocus the debate on these types of issues will require leadership. While I was sitting in church yesterday, the pastor's words reminded me that the Bible is full of stories about people who were called to be leaders in unusual ways. Today, I believe that I'm being called to lead by helping to clear the field in this race so that a positive, conservative message can rise to the top of the field. With this in mind, I will suspend my campaign immediately. I encourage other Republican presidential candidates to consider doing the same so that the voters can focus on a limited number of candidates who can offer a positive, conservative alternative to the current frontrunner. This is fundamentally important to the future of the party and, more importantly, to the future of our country. This is a difficult decision, as so many wonderful people stepped up to support our campaign. Tonette and I are very thankful for the many outstanding volunteers and the excellent staff who helped us throughout the campaign. You all have been like family to us. And speaking of family, I want to personally thank my wife, Tonette, who has been a rock, as well as our two amazing sons, Matt and Alex. I thank my parents and my brother David and his family and all of our other family and friends for their love and support. Most of all, I want to thank God. I want to thank God for his abundant grace. Win or lose, it has always been more than enough. Thank you.
With us now here on the set, and Charles, so he is leading by stepping out of the way. Is that what you heard?
That's what he said. And you heard no mention of the troubles that his campaign has had, and allegedly we've heard campaign finance troubles. But this is in keeping with what Governor Walker did in 2006 when he was trailing badly in for the nomination for governor here. He withdrew pretty early when it became clear that he didn't have the support within the party and the financial support.
It's a game of chess, and he's planning the next move, perhaps.
Perhaps so, and we won't see that first finance report for a little while yet, but after October we'll see it and see just how difficult the fundraising really has been within his presidential campaign. Had he announced in March or April when he was riding high in the polls, might have been a different story on the money side. But there are a lot of rumors about difficult fundraising. We haven't yet seen an official report for him.
Well, with 16 candidates, it's got to be tough out there.
It's extremely tough, and when you're in the top three, you're in good shape. But when you're plummeting down in the polls, it's very, very hard.
All right, Charles, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks
Thank you.
Let's go back down live to the Edgewater Hotel. Eric Franke and Jessica Arp.
Susan, Professor Franklin, yeah, it was a brief statement, and then he left the room and didn't answer any questions. But anything stand out to you about his comments here, Jess?
Well, as you mentioned, I believe I am being called to lead by helping to clear the field and calling on other folks to step out of the way as well, not saying who he would specifically support, whose message he believes is that positive one that would move the GOP in the direction of Ronald Reagan. He discusses Ronald Reagan in many of his speeches, and starting today with him is sort of no surprise. But this discussion of the idea of we need to get out of the way, there's too much noise, you know, that's an interesting one. That's a much different narrative than fundraising or momentum, as we were talking about before the speech, but what he wants folks to remember today.
Yeah, then we'll see from here what happens in terms of where that money goes, that if there was anything left when we see that fundraising report come out at the end of the month. Mark and Susan, back to you.
All right, Eric Franke and Jessica Arp. Thanks, guys.
The other major story that developed this afternoon is the death of Justice of the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Patrick Crooks died at the state capitol this afternoon, and that is where our Dave DeLozier is with details. Dave?
Yeah, Susan, you know, paramedics were called here to the state capitol at 2:46 this afternoon for a report of a patient not breathing and no pulse. And a short time later, the Dane County Medical Examiner was called here. Now, Supreme Court Justice Patrick Crooks devoted more than half of his life to serving on the bench. He served 39 years as a Wisconsin judge, including 20 as a Supreme Court justice. Now, just last week, the 77-year-old Supreme Court justice announced his retirement from the bench. A native of Green Bay, Crooks won his first 10-year term to the High Court in 1996 and then was reelected in 2006. He is survived by his wife and 6 children, 5 of whom were attorneys. Now, obviously, this has stunned the folks here at the Capitol, and there are not a lot of details yet available on this, but obviously a very big loss today for the state of Wisconsin.
Absolutely. Dave DeLozier reporting live from the state capitol. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. There is other news on this Monday when we come back, including a historic visit from the Pope.
Pope Francis is set to land in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. That's when Live at 5 continues.
You're watching Mark Kane and Susan Simon and meteorologist Gary Canalti. This is News 3 Live at 5.
A new survey reveals that more than 1 in 4 undergraduate women at the UW report being the victim of rape or sexual touching at the University of Wisconsin.
News 3's Keely Arthur is in the newsroom now with the details. Keely?
Yeah, if you spend any time on the University of Wisconsin campus, chances are you have met someone affected by sexual assault. The survey put out by the Association of American Universities shows that more than 27% of female students say they've been raped or touched sexually. Chancellor Rebecca Blank and other university officials addressed the situation at a news conference today, saying that there are a number of changes that need to be made.
We want to encourage more people in our community to feel comfortable intervening when they observe someone in a potentially difficult situation. We also want this campus community to understand the problems related to alcohol abuse, which is closely intertwined with this problem.
7 colleges to participate in the Campus Sexual Assault Climate Survey. Tonight on News 3 at 6, I'll detail what the university is doing to combat these risky behaviors they say contribute to sexual assault.
All right, Keely, thank you, and welcome back to News 3.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Keely. We'll see you at 6. Pope Francis spent the day in one of Cuba's largest cities. Huge crowds turned out in the heat to cheer Pope Francis as he rode through the streets of Holguin. It's the first time a pope has visited the city, the birthplace of Fidel and Raul Castro. Pope Francis celebrated the Feast of St. Matthew during an open-air mass. He used the opportunity to acknowledge the difficulties still facing the Catholic Church in Cuba under the Castro regime.
I know the efforts and the sacrifices being made by the Church in Cuba to bring Christ's word and presence to all.
Pope Francis leaves Cuba tomorrow for the United States. His first stop is Washington, D.C. The Pope will also visit New York City and Philadelphia before heading back to Rome.
It is a major black eye for one of the world's biggest car makers. Federal and state regulators accuse Volkswagen of cheating on emissions tests with nearly 500,000 diesel cars. The Environmental Protection Agency says VW found a way to circumvent emissions requirements with a device that lets cars detect when they're being tested and emit far less than normal emissions. Volkswagen stock plunged 20% on Wall Street as the VW's CEO issued a public apology. Stocks closed higher as investors try to look beyond the uncertain timing of a possible interest rate increase by the federal government. The Dow Industrials gained 125 points to end the day at 16,510. The NASDAQ Composite Index was up almost 2.
Well, our string of perfect weather continues. Gary's end of summer forecast is coming up.
And later, if it looks like a duck, it isn't necessarily one. That's in our final touch.
On this busy news day, the weather's about as quiet as you could get for this time of year. Let's start out by taking a look at the live view from our WISC Skycam looking toward the east. Skies are mostly clear. There's hardly a cloud anywhere around Wisconsin. Temperatures at 73, winds out of the south at 12. The dew point temperature is only the mid-40s, so the air is pretty dry. Weather track shows an absence of clouds through much of the northern two-thirds of the country. Most of the rain is either in the southeast or the southwestern part of the country, where they're actually under flash flood watches. But a weak cold front is to our north and west, pushing to northwestern Minnesota. Behind that front, temperatures drop into the 50s and 60s just north of the U.S.-Canadian border. But ahead of the front, temperatures are in the 70s here, with 80s and even some low 90s out to the west of us, and dew point temperatures that are climbing a little bit out to the west of us. Might see an increase in clouds for tomorrow and tomorrow night, but any rain showers should stay to our north and west. And on Wednesday, look for skies to become partly sunny again with temperatures in the upper 70s. Forecast for tonight, mostly clear, not as cool, low temperature dropping to 52. Tomorrow, sunny and a little milder with a high of 77. And for Wednesday, becoming partly sunny and very mild with a high of 78. 7-day forecast, you can see those temperatures staying mid to upper 70s, nighttime low temperatures in the mid 50s all the way through the weekend into the early part of next week, and I don't have any rain in that 7-day forecast, which is good news for the people who picked up the heavy rain last week. So some good news there.
Wow, what a stretch.
Yeah, autumn starts on Wednesday.
Wednesday morning.
All right, thanks, Gary.
You're welcome.
Well, the Emmy Awards last night saw plenty of dramatic moments.
And many of them were on the red carpet. Style editor Shayna Mace is here to recap the fashion winners and losers when Live at 5 continues.
Well, the red carpet of last night's Emmy Awards was a scorcher.
And not just because it was 90 degrees last night in Los Angeles. I felt so bad for everybody all dressed up.
Yeah.
Madison Magazine style editor Shayna Mace is here, as she is every year after the Emmys, with the fashion hits and misses. Good to see you.
Hi.
What'd you think overall?
Overall, there were a couple different things. I saw a lot of minimalist beauty. We saw a lot of pulled back hair, a lot of sleek hair looks, a lot of pared back makeup looks, and then some of the dress silhouettes were even a little pared back as well. So kind of interesting, but it's always fun to dive into best and worst as well.
Let's start with the best.
The best, of course. Kerry Washington and Marc Jacobs. This is kind of a mesh design, but this was literally right off the runway. So Marc Jacobs showed this on Thursday. The Emmys were on Sunday. So that's what you get when you're an A-list star, right? You get to show it right off the runway. But she's actually doing I saw also a lot of bobs as well. So not sure if hers is a faux bob or if her hair is actually that short, but we saw a couple of bobs is a big hair trend as well.
Let's see Jamie Alexander in Armani Privé.
Kind of a little mini trend here of rainbow dresses, but I just thought this one was so unique and interesting. Probably not for everyone, but I just thought the rainbow striping was beautiful. She's doing the sleek minimalist hair as well that we saw, a lot of slicked back hair, which I think is a great look for this dress because you can't, you don't want to overdo it in something this statement making.
All right, we have what, Sarah Paulson?
Sarah Paulson, American Horror Story actress, also wearing a really popular trend, the off-the-shoulder trend as well. This one is Prabal Gurung, so navy and black, which is also a great trend for fall as well. Sequins, we saw a lot of sequins as well. So I think when you go with such a statement sequin, it's nice to have a more minimalist silhouette like what she's wearing here.
Let's take a look at Sarah Hyland and Zach Posen.
Yep, and here's that off-the-shoulder trend again. She's also rocking the hair trend, so they're all kind of doing the same thing but different. Also the color of the season, kind of this oxblood berry, marsala-ish combination, but this is, we said Zach Posen, and just a beautiful silhouette. I think it's tailored to her body perfectly.
Claire Danes is next.
Yep, so this is definitely a little bit interesting, a mini trend of chains that you'll see on the side and the front, and then she's doing, her bob is actually a faux bob. Her hair is longer than that normally. But she's kind of rocking both great colors, navy and berry, and stripes in a Prada dress. So I just thought her look was really interesting and unique.
All right, beautiful. Let's see who missed the mark.
Missed the mark, there's always some, but that's what we have to talk about, right? So this is Naomi Grossman, American Horror Story. So there's this kind of like nude dress trend going on, and I think the trend kind of needs to end. It's just
that's not good.
Not a great look.
No.
I wasn't loving it. Sounds like you agree, but you know, her hair and makeup, of course, is gorgeous, and I do think she paired the right hair and makeup. This is Danielle Brooks and Christian Siriano. I don't know. I guess I can't really explain it. I just don't love it. Like, it's just...
She's an Orange is the New Black.
She is, and I love her in that show, but I just don't. I think I do love Christian Siriano, too, as a designer, but I just think it missed the mark. But she's having fun, so that's important, right? And she did the minimalist hair as well. So, Catherine Hahn and Vivienne Westwood. This is a Vivienne Westwood trademark silhouette, especially in the top right there. But to me, it looked like two dresses were kind of stapled together, which I don't love. But I do. Vivienne Westwood's a very directional designer, so very cool. Heidi Klum, great body. Why are you covering it up in Versace? This is a little bit, it looks kind of, again, like a little stapled together. I think if she just went kind of with the sleeveless dress, you know, which is like her trademark, kind of that little dress, just taking off that left-hand part, it would have been fabulous. And then Judith Light, you know, I don't even know what to say about this besides it's a high-waisted skirt with a work blouse. So we're at the Emmys, so I think we can step it up a little bit.
The hits and the misses.
Yes, always fun to talk about.
It is. Shana, thanks for being with us. We have the whole list at channel3000.com with the pictures of the dresses.
Yeah.
Thanks
Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
We'll be right back.
Okay, so I know we just talked about the Emmys, but let's be real. Who was watching the Emmys? We're watching the Packers. They were on fire last night at Lambeau. Tonight at 6, we're going to head to Green Bay to hear from the Packers head coach, Mike McCarthy, along with an update on injuries. So join us at the top of the hour. I did do a little flipping, but I mean, I was all Packers.
The ratings were huge for the Packers.
I bet.
All right, Michelle, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. In today's final touch, it looks like a duck.
But it doesn't walk like one nor talk like one. That's because it's a tomato. The unlikely shaped fruit was grown in Genesee County, Michigan. Marie David picked it right out of her garden. Husband Bob had to see it to believe it. He saw it and he believed it. This is the first rubber duck-looking tomato these longtime gardeners have ever produced. The couple says they are in no hurry to cut up the tomato anytime soon. But eventually, it's going to have to do something with it.
And we're sure that's one tomato.
That's what they say.
Wow.
She said she's seen double ones before, but never with a beak on it.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So there you go. That's our time for now. Thanks for watching. The CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley is coming up next.